What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you live on Thursday, April the 10th, 2025. And like I mentioned, we're here live on the ScoopDuck on 3 YouTube channel, as well as on X. So thank you guys for being here. Glad to have you along for today's episode. And joining me is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, how are you?
Good, doing so far so good. It's Thirsty Thursday.
There you go. There you go. And we got to hear from a couple of players and coaches out in Eugene for Oregon's 7th of 15 spring practices. Also got a pretty substantial recruiting update to dig into here. I feel like for us, Justin, we live and breathe Oregon recruiting. So maybe it makes sense for us to start with the recruiting update that is kind of running throughout the fan base right now, the one that everyone's talking about, and that is 5-star plus Nixa, Missouri offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell. It more or less sounds like he is closer to a decision than he expected, and the quote was that he has all the information that he needs. But, and this of course came from on 3 Steve Wiltfong earlier on this morning. But basically, he said that he has all the information he needs, but he didn't give a decision date or timeline, and he didn't rule out taking his official visits, which are already set to a majority of his 6 top schools. So let's just kind of start with that there, Justin. You know, if you guys that are watching and have anything else you wanted to add, let us know what you're thinking here in the comments. Maybe I'll throw one on the screen. But yeah, Justin, what'd you think of that update from Wiltfong this morning?
Yeah, it's weird to me because it sounds like a kid who isn't sure if he's ready or not, right? Like, maybe, I'm nearing decision. And to me, I think that this really sounds more like, there's 2 or 3 schools out of that 6 that are probably in the running here, and he's getting closer to a decision. But, until he sets a date, or if he starts canceling official visits or something like that, I don't know if it was a bidding tool or if it was just something that he kind of felt like he wanted to get off his chest. I would say this, I guess, in regards to Oregon, I do think Oregon's probably one of those top 3 schools. My fear is he hasn't been on campus at Oregon in a while, and he's been at some of these other schools more recently. So I think in terms of, Oregon's chances there, I would feel a little bit better if he made a visit, I guess, between now and a potential decision. So, I guess we'll just have to see, what develops there. But I think if you're Oregon and you're kind of looking at that, you're hoping you can get him back on campus soon, because I think it's been a while, and that is the one thing that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, that's something that I think doesn't necessarily inspire a lot of confidence if you're an Oregon fan or just looking at it from the Oregon angle. But an update like this does kind of go in line with what Pete Nakos reported earlier this week, I believe it was, and it's that a trio of schools seem to be creating some separation and kind of trending for Cantwell, the number 1 player in the country for the 2026 class, and that's Oregon, Miami, and Georgia. So I think with this update coming out, it's one that has fans excited. I think someone on the ScoopDuck message boards said something like Curtis and Cantwell are probably talking or might be talking. Of course, we know that both Oregon and Georgia are pursuing both of those guys, ranked number 1 at their respective position. Cantwell, an offensive tackle, and Curtis, the number 1 quarterback in the country, who has a decision date that is officially under a month away. That decision's set for May 5th between Oregon and Georgia. So we've talked about Cantwell a whole lot over at ScoopDuck, Justin, and we know that the Oregon staff seems like they're pushing all the right buttons here. And we also know that I think track has somewhat of a role in his decision. We know that he's an All-American thrower, and there's some connections there with the Oregon staff. So I think for me, I'm feeling decent about where Oregon's at in this recruitment with Cantwell for a couple of reasons. And the first one's Alik Terry and just how he's done as a recruiter and as a coach. I think both of those are on the rise. And then also just the landing factor. And this being a guy who's from his home state, and I think that inspires some comfort, and I think that'll ultimately help Oregon a lot here.
Yeah, I think first of all, I mean, we'll back up to Curtis. We're several weeks away there, 3.5 weeks away, or whatever the number is. That's a lifetime in recruiting, so that one's going to have more twists and turns ahead. So, and I would say, I do think that Cantwell and Curtis have probably had some sort of conversation. Maybe said, "Hey, man, what do you think of this school and this one?" Georgia and Oregon's in the obviously in the running for both amongst the top 2 or top 3 for both of those recruits. So I would say this, and just not to be total devil's advocate or the Debbie Downer, but it would be an absolute gut punch if both of them ended up at Georgia, which is totally possible. So Duck fans might want to be a little leery about getting too excited and pegging them both as future Ducks. Now that would be the ultimate, boom from from this development or these developments. But there could be a big gut punch if they both ended up at Georgia, which is totally possible. So we'll just have to trust that the staff knows what they're doing and see how they're able to navigate the next few weeks.
And Oregon's looking for some momentum, and they're building it steadily throughout the month. We're seeing guys come out to campus for visits, which reminds me, we have a really cool story over on ScoopDuck right now that I wrote, where recruits are basically talking about the players that are standing out to them at Oregon spring practice. And really what that was is I'm just asking these guys when I interview them following their visits, who's kind of catching your eye, who's standing out to you. And that's really kind of the most insider information that we've been able to get so far here in spring practice, because spring practice is closed to the media. But I just wanted to throw that one out there because I think it's an interesting read. And you guys, if you're not with us already, you should come and see us at scoopduck.com. $1 gets you 7 days of access to all of our premium stories. So if you like listening to Justin and I on the podcast, come and give us a shot at ScoopDuck. We've got a newsletter, an awesome message board community, and it's just a fun time right now with spring ball in the air, Justin.
Yep, lots going on, and recruiting's going to be, I know I felt like Debbie Downer there for a minute with the, potential gut punch, but I mean, recruiting's going to get going. It's going to get rocking and rolling. Dan Lanning does this every year and, makes his move when he makes his move. And I think if you're a Duck fan, the next few months should be very fun and are a great time to follow along. Even if you're new to recruiting, it's a great time to jump in and kind of learn about it and understand why fans are so fanatical about it.
And before we get to kind of the latest updates and headlines from spring football, Justin, is there anything else that you wanted to throw out there or just kind of go back and forth on here in the recruiting world?
No, the Ducks, Oregon, the staff has a big visit weekend, I believe, coming up next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend. And there will be some prospects at the spring game, of course, as well. And then, then those just start, doing some camps and getting ready for official visits. But if you go look at the list of official visitors, assuming they all make it in May or June, whenever they're coming, it's a laundry list of who's who of top 100 players in the country. So, if you think Oregon recruiting has fallen off or just, isn't going the way that you want it to, I would just, again, urge, stress that patience and just wait, because it really feels like it's building up to something.
It's certainly building. And I think that even though it's been quiet, I think that we're only in April, so it's not a huge reason to panic. But I know that Oregon fans kind of are spoiled and want good recruiting news all the time, but that's not always the reality of it. Want to get to a couple comments here before we talk spring football, Justin. This will kind of transition us a little bit, maybe. Eric says, I'm hoping for some more explosiveness out of the run game this year. Seems like last year, James was super consistent, but never busted out a long run. And he adds he's thinking of CJ Verdell at Ohio State, and just talked about some of the longer runs that Oregon running backs have had recently. So I think this is a great point, because even though the run game was consistent and strong overall, it really wasn't explosive, if you want to key in on that word. We're not seeing long runs, and I don't think Jordan James was ever a home run hitting type of running back. But maybe we'll see that change this year with Mekhi Hughes coming over from Tulane, with Noah Whittington hopefully taking a step back and closer to being at 100%. You have Dink Riggs, another guy. Jordan Davison comes over. That's a loaded room, as it kind of always has been in Eugene.
Yeah, it's a great point. Eric makes a really good point there. I mean, the running game was consistent. running game was a good part of the offense, but yeah, the number of over 20 plays or over 30 plays was very low. It was non-existent from an explosive standpoint. So I do believe that that's a very fair criticism, if that's what we're calling it, of the run game. And I think you look at Mekhi Hughes and the way he's put together and his speed, his top end speed, and just his burst. I mean, that's a guy that certainly looks like, he could be the part and add that element to the run game. And we know Noah Whittington can, and I agree with you. I'm not sure that he was ever fully 100% last year. He did add the physicality to his game last year that he hadn't had in previous years. So, maybe this is a year he kind of puts it all together. And with regards to running backs, I mean, that is one position where two guys is better than one. I mean, the ability for those guys to rotate in and out and stay fresh all game long is a valuable commodity for both of them. So I think we could be looking at a very dangerous two-headed monster there. And like Eric, adding that element into the run game, that explosive run element could be a huge piece of the equation this year, because quite frankly, there's a lot of other question marks about the offense this year with so many unknowns.
Let's keep rolling through some of these comments here. We got one from our guy, Andrew. He's always tuned in, so we got to show him some love and answer his question. He says, think Sadiq goes off and then goes to the NFL next year. I think it's not looking like the likely outcome at this point, Justin, but it's also not really that much of a stretch. I mean, Terrence Ferguson has kind of cemented himself as one of the better Oregon tight ends that we've seen. He broke multiple records for tight ends at Oregon, but I don't think he ever had the hype that Kenyon does. And Terrence was a tremendous athlete coming out of high school out of the state of Colorado, but Kenyon was someone who bit by bit, year by year, has kind of carved out a bigger role, and his athleticism is on full display now, and he's around 250 pounds and really rounded into form. I don't think there's been a tight end in a long time that's had this kind of hype, and I think if he has a great year, it certainly would be in the cards for him to go to the NFL. I don't think the staff would want that, but I think, just because you selfishly want to hang on to your best guys, right? But I don't think that I'd write this one off.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's not anything I've thought about until reading this question, which doesn't make it a bad question. It's actually a really good one. But yeah, I guess for me, the trend in the NFL has been the more athletic tight end coming in and becoming a bigger piece of the offense in relation to the NFL and NFL offenses. So you look at a guy like Sadiq, and he's certainly, if he can improve his in-line blocking, he's got all the athletic tools. So he would be a great fit in the NFL. So I think for him, obviously, it is going to go, based on what he does this season. And then it's going to be based on, who else goes into the draft at his position. If it's not a very deep talent tight end pool, maybe he sees a little better opening to go in. And if it is, a little bit of a deeper pool, maybe that 1 year where he, has the opportunity to come back, and Oregon can get, very competitive from an NIL standpoint, those things might match up. So yeah, I would be somewhat surprised if he went to the NFL after this year, but again, we'll just have to see what kind of year he has.
We'll see. And then we can't forget about Jamari Johnson, who comes over from Louisville. He's someone I'm really excited to see as well. One more question here, Justin, and then we'll keep it rolling here. This one comes from our guy, Mark Henley, putting us on the spot here, Justin. He asks, next recruit to commit to Oregon, in your opinion? This is a tough one because we don't have any, aside from Curtis, correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, I don't think we have any commitment dates that are set in stone that we know of right now. But I think a couple guys that I think could certainly be in the mix. We just finished talking about Jackson Cantwell. I know you and I are going to do some digging on that one and see what we can turn up. I know Talanoa Ely was on campus earlier this spring. I think Oregon's in a really fierce battle with USC there. Devon Benjamin is another one out of Southern California, Oaks Christian. And Tommy Tofi, I think, is someone I feel really good about, the San Francisco offensive lineman out of Archbishop Reardon. I think for me, those are probably the guys that I'm most focused on right now. But I think it'll be a much easier question to address once we get through spring practice.
Yeah, just, basically in today's recruiting, April and early May are not big commit months if you're recruiting high-profile guys typically. And the reason for that is because you're close enough at that point to start taking your official visits in May and June. And so a lot of those guys are hey, I've come this far. So, why not just go ahead and continue, my recruitment this next month or 6 weeks and take these visits and try to see what's happening there. So, yeah, if it was me, it's got to be Jared Curtis is the one we've got to say is the most likely because he's got a commitment date and because, just Oregon's a great spot there. Otherwise, guess, and I would say a lot of the same names you did. Davin Benjamin's another one. But, yeah, I mean, you start looking at Tommy Kofi and some of these guys that could potentially make a decision, and those are some options as well. I don't know that any of them are all that close. Derek Coleman Bruce is another one.
Yeah, Derek Coleman Bruce is a really good one to keep tabs on here as we kind of get further into the spring. And I think something that's going to benefit Oregon is the fact that they have one of the later spring games compared to other programs nationally. So a lot of these guys have already brought top recruits in, and then now Oregon's kind of patiently waiting and taking a little bit of the wait and see approach, and they'll get them back. I would think. In the near future. So we'll see how that goes. And I want to transition into some spring football talk here, Justin. We got to hear from Dante Moore today, Oregon quarterback, redshirt sophomore, and I think that he didn't have anything too crazy to say. I mean, I think what he had to say about the wide receiver room is probably the most exciting quote that we got from him. Just calling some of the newer wide receivers that Oregon welcomes, DeCorian Moore, Cooper Perry, Malik Benson, just calling them dogs. And the DeCorian Moore hype train continues to roll on full steam ahead. And, he was talking about how he's like, he played in Texas football. Texas football is the real deal. I trained out there in Dallas. That was kind of one that stuck out to me, but basically just, legitimizing and validating all the hype that we're hearing.
I didn't get a lot of Dr. or Austin sad, but they both did recognize DeCorian Moore. And so I think that says a lot about Dak Moore. And I'm like you, I hate to get just too excited or too amped up about a freshman, but it's hard not to when you're talking about DeCorian and kind of what he brings to the table. And so, as the hype train rolls on. But I like that brought out both quarterbacks this week. I would like to believe that it's more of a quarterback competition than we think. I do know that Austin Novosad's a really good quarterback and would probably start at a lot of major schools across the country should he have that opportunity. But I do think him and Dante Moore are battling it out. But I think Dante Moore's got so much God-given talent. It's going to be really hard to not start him over Austin Novosad. But that's what spring's for, is to let them battle it out and let the best man win, and we'll see what happens later in the fall, of course.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, I want to see it be a quarterback battle. I think I just have a hard time seeing, Dante coming to Oregon and sitting behind Dylan Gabriel if, he didn't feel like he had a really, really good shot to have this job, to get this job come the 2025 season. But he also complimented Akili Smith Jr., Oregon's early enrollee, true freshman quarterback, and just the stuff that he's seen from him, kind of how he's hit the ground running. But Dante Moore is certainly a guy that's made of the right stuff. I think you listen to him talk. He's incredibly humble, doesn't really take a lot of credit. And I said that I don't know if it was a coincidence or not that Marcus Mariota is in town this week or was in town. But I think that you put those guys side by side in the media environment, and they're both going to act very similar, which I think is great.
Yeah, I could see the similarities there in the way they kind of talk, kind of like Marcus was a quiet leader. I mean, he was a lead by example kind of a guy, and clearly that worked. You can get away with that when you play at the level that Marcus Mariota did. So if Dante Moore plays anywhere near that level, he can get away with it too. I will say this, my final thought on the quarterback competition. I think in a perfect world, all things considered, again, if they're going to go through spring, they'll go through fall. I think Austin Novosad's going to have to be so much better than Dante Moore that it has to be clear that you give him the job. You know what I mean? I think Dante Moore, like you said, he's the transfer. Everybody's he's the assumed starter, all that natural talent, the big arm, everything he's got. I think Austin Novosad, has to be near perfect and have the difference be, that much more for him to earn the job, in my opinion. So I think it's Dante Moore's to lose, probably by a pretty good margin, if I was guessing.
Sure. And I think I'd be right there with you in that guess. The last thing I'll add about Dante before we talk about some other stuff here, Justin, is that he mentioned one of his goals this offseason was just to kind of trim his body fat and kind of get right physically. And he said that he's PR'd on, in his, no, it wasn't like the 40, but just in his speed this offseason, which I don't think is a small update because Dante wasn't really known coming out of high school as this elite athlete, as a true dual threat quarterback. But I think he's a guy who is more like a little bit more of your NFL pocket quarterback who is mobile within the pocket, but maybe isn't going to take off and run too much. So he'll hurt you with his legs when it's there, but I think he's got the smarts to know that he isn't going to be forcing it and tucking it and running quite a bit. But I thought that was a cool update as well. And I hope we get to see him take off a little bit because the last two Oregon quarterbacks, maybe not so much Gabriel, certainly Nix, but the last two Oregon quarterbacks were pretty good with the ball taking off as well.
Yeah, it could be a real nice wrinkle to his game, kind of adding that threat or making it a bigger threat, if you will. Because I think his escapability is good. He's not a statue, but yeah, he's not a burner. He's not going to race down the field and beat everybody for an 80-yard scramble. That's not really his game. But Oregon doesn't need that. They didn't rely on that with Dylan Gabriel. They didn't rely on that with Bo Nix. It was something that they'd always kind of have in the bag and used as needed. But I mean, we both know that Oregon has tried really hard to keep their quarterbacks upright and available, the best availability. So obviously you're going to limit your quarterback running if you can get away with it. And I think that's a big thing for Oregon. That'll be a big thing with Dante Moore this year as well.
Let's move on a little bit and talk some defense, particularly the defensive line. We got to hear from defensive lineman Amari Washington, as well as defensive line coach Tony Tuioti. And Justin, you had the story on Tuioti and kind of some of his key takeaways, key points from today's practice. So I'll kind of toss this one up to you because it seems like it was one of the more genuine and open discussions or updates that we've gotten from one of the coaches in a little bit.
Yeah, it was probably some of the best intel that we've gotten anywhere from anybody, and we know Dan Lanning doesn't really like to talk about that kind of stuff, keeps injuries close to the vest. There wasn't a lot of injury talk, but I did enjoy how Coach Tuioti, went, pretty specific on a few guys, Bear Alexander being one, and talked about Bear coming in and, buying into the culture and being a good worker. Said he was kind of quiet at first, but has really kind of come out of his shell and gave him a lot of positive talk. Highlighted Jericho Johnson as another guy as well that's having a good spring so far. Talked about Amari Washington, the fact that he's going to be a key piece out there, as most of us expect. Highlighted Aiden Breland quite a bit as well, which was a pleasant surprise and he compared him to Brandon Dorless in the way that, he's a longer guy and you can move him out wide, or you can actually move him into the interior as more of like a situational pass rusher from the interior, and said that Aiden Breland does an excellent job of that. So kind of nice to have a guy like that that's versatile, that you can move along the line of scrimmage, given the down and distance for the different situations. So, sounds like something that, that we've both said, and I've said before, is, you don't have a Derek Harmon out there and a Jordan Birch, but I do think that, you look across this line and I think it's a legit too deep of guys that can play, maybe not a first rounder like Derek Harmon. Those are hard to come by, but I think you've got really, really good football players that are 2 and 3 deep. I mean, you start talking about the edge position, which he highlighted on a little bit, said Elijah Rushing's added 15, 20 pounds. Elijah Rushing might be like the 4th best edge player on the team, and he was a 5-star coming out of high school. But, I mean, you got Mateo out there, and you got Tatum Tuioti, and you got Blake Purchase, and, I mean, you got some really good edge players. So that's a good problem to have. And like I said, it was a great update from Coach Tuioti. I'm basically repeating what he said, but it was a great update. I encourage you guys to go read it or check it out, or I have the video included if you want to watch him talk about it. It was really good detail on that defensive line and the guys standing out so far this spring.
The two that caught my attention from listening to Coach Tuioti was one, Aiden Breland, And then two, I'd also say Tion Gray. To start with Aiden Breland, since he was someone that I covered really closely coming out of high school at nearby Mater Dei, he was a guy that was really highly rated, but seeing him multiple times in person, he never really took over games. And like, you would look at him and like, you can't miss this guy. He's just a large human. But I'd probably argue that Tom Tom has had a more productive high school career than Breland has. So I think that there was a lot of untapped potential with Breland, and that's probably part of the reason that we didn't see him a whole lot last year, was that he just maybe wasn't totally ready. And then Tuioti also talked about how like, those snaps just weren't there for guys because they had so many good, experienced players in front of them. Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell, the two main ones that we're highlighting here. But Breland now, I think, is someone who is really well positioned to improve this year. And it sounds like he's taking tremendous advantage of really quality coaching that we know that they have at Oregon. So I think he's someone we're excited about. We saw him a little bit in the Rose Bowl. Tuioti said he was one of the team's best, probably the team's best interior run defender or pass rusher, I think it was, last year, which is encouraging to hear. And then he also talked about how both Tion Gray and Terrence Green are like a legit 6'6", 345 pounds, which how do you hear those numbers and not get excited, Justin? I think that one other thing I'll just add here that one of the ScoopDuck writers wrote is just that Bear Alexander is the only transfer that we're probably going to see along the D line this year. So I'm excited that we'll get to see more of the quote unquote homegrown talent that the Ducks recruited out of high school really get a shot.
I think that's going to be a theme of the team this year at a lot of positions. You're going to, they had to go plug and play at offensive tackle this year, but overall, Dante Moore is an intriguing one. How do you classify him, right? He was technically a transfer, but he's a multi-year transfer who sat a year. Is he getting developed at Oregon? Like, that's a tougher one, but I don't really consider him a transfer. But, you can start looking at these receivers. It's a really good wide receiver room, and you're going to see a lot of faces out there. And cornerback, you're going to see a lot of cornerbacks out there that have been in the program for a couple years now. You might see some of the 5-star freshmen, whether it's at corner or at safety. So yeah, it's kind of an exciting year for fans to kind of see, instead of it being like more transfers, for it to be, guys that were recruited out of high school and have been in the program for a couple years now. It'll be nice to kind of have that connection.
And then we know that Amari Washington is another guy that's going to take on a bulk of the leadership along the D line, right there with Mateo Uyangalele, who was just an absolute dude last year. I mean, Tuioti highlighted how Mateo is one of those guys on this defense that just showed up when you needed to play. And there's no better example of that than the insane performance he had against Wisconsin last year. I don't see the Ducks winning that game without number 10 out there on defense, but I'm super excited about this defense. We just got to kind of see what they look like. I don't even think the spring game is going to tell us a whole lot, Justin, because we're not going to see all the starters playing at the same time. But just to see a little bit more of a guy like an Ashton Porter as well. We haven't really talked too much about him. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of guys, Jericho Johnson, another one. There's going to be a lot of guys we see in the spring game that I think, unless you follow recruiting or follow the team really closely, probably more so recruiting, like, you're going to hear those names and then be like, oh, that guy's still here, or that guy's here. I kind of forgot about him.
No, it's a good way to, it's a good way to say it, because a lot of these guys, and you just named a couple, Jericho Johnson and Ashton Porter, and some of these guys haven't gotten a lot of run at all last couple seasons, but they've been there. So now, those will be guys that, oh man, I remember when Oregon signed him. Now he's, getting the chance to play, or whatever the case might be. So, clearly Oregon feels pretty good about its defensive line group that they have, because Barry Alexander's been the only defensive line transfer so far. Portal opens up again here in about a week, so they could add more. I'm not sure that they will. And, it's been great. I think one of the things fans love about Mateo and Tatum Tuioti is that they both signed with Oregon out of high school, and they played last year, and they've been key parts of the defense for a couple years now. So it's been fun to see those guys grow. Just because they've been with the program for a few years. So, it is nice to have, guys that have been in your program for a few years that you kind of get to know their story a little bit. And it's great to see guys come from the state of Oregon, come to play at Oregon, and watch those guys be able to live out childhood dreams for most of them to play at Oregon and do that. So Bryce Betcher is a perfect example of a homegrown kid basically getting to live out his dream, right? And he's dedicated to football this year, so super excited for him.
That'll be a fun one to watch for sure this year, Justin. Yeah, so 7 practices down, 8 to go for the Ducks, culminating in the April 26th spring game. I don't feel like I have anything else to add here, Justin. Are you ready to get out of here and kind of wind it down?
Yeah, I know we like to stick around that 30-minute mark, and I see the timer up there. It looks like we're right at the 30-minute mark, so that's always a good thing. Of course, if you're still tuned in right now, Dan Lanning's birthday, so I guess we make this his birthday episode. Big 39 is last year in the 30s for Danimal. And a small side story that I guess I've forgotten, I just haven't, but I was in Portland this weekend for my son's soccer games, and on Sunday I went to his game, and he was warming up while there was another game going on before us. And I went over to the parent side, and I'm walking by, and it was like, look at this guy. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I think that's Joey Harrington. So ran into Joey and talked to him for a little bit. His son was playing soccer in the game before my son played. And it was just kind of fun to chat with him for a little bit and run into him and see how he's doing.
Cool little interaction there. I've had Joey on the podcast before, and he is an awesome dude. Really embodies Oregon football and everything I think it means to be a Duck. So that's awesome. I'm a big Joey fan. But I think that'll do it for us here on today's episode. If you guys want to find more Justin, you can follow him at jhopkinssd. Find me anywhere at Torres Sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck On 3 YouTube channel and come and see us at ScoopDuck.com. Try us out for a whole week for just $1. And share the show. Share the Ducks Dish podcast with everybody you know. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.